We know, for example, from polling that universal background checks are universally supported just about by gun owners. Majority of gun owners, overwhelming majority of gun owners think that's a good idea. So if we've got lobbyists in Washington claiming to speak for gun owners, saying something different, we need to go to the source and reach out to people directly. We can't allow those filters to get in the way of common sense.
All right, 45 past the hour. With us now from Capitol Hill, Democratic Representative from Maryland, Congressman Elijah Cummings, and Republican Representative from Virginia, Congressman Scott Rigell. They're part of a bipartisan group introducing a bill today that would make firearms trafficking a federal crime and make it even harder for people to buy guns for anyone who's prohibited from buying guns on their own. So it's good to have you both
good to be
on
with
the
you.
show
Thank
this
you.
morning.
Guys, thanks a lot, Elijah. Scott, thank you so much. Scott, tell me, why do you think it's important to support this piece of legislation?
Well, what we're trying to do, and this bill does, is it really puts up it's part of putting up an impenetrable wall with our Second Amendment. On one side of that wall, we've got our lawful gun owners, of which I am one, and a strong proponent of our Second Amendment, but also to keep the bad guys, the criminals, from having access to guns. And that's basically what this bill does. It surprised me that there was not a law on our books, a federal law, that directly addressed gun trafficking and made it illegal and indeed to buy a gun for someone else and to traffic guns. And so we're addressing that, and it's common sense and common ground.
Elijah, talk about it.
Yeah, this is so very, very important. You know, Joe, law enforcement came to our committee a while back when we were dealing with Fast and Furious, as a matter of fact. And they didn't ask for a trafficking law. They begged for it. And they said that they wanted to be more effective and efficient, and there is no federal trafficking law. So they want to make sure that those the criminals do not get their hands on guns. And so what this legislation will do is it'll make it much tougher, increase the penalties, and actually create a law against trafficking of guns. And so, and this is something, by the way, that just about every single law enforcement agency and organization, just about every prosecutor, they want these tools because they tell us, say, look, you all are paying us a lot of money to do our jobs. Now give us the tools to be able to effectively do the jobs. And I think this is what they're going to do. And I'm excited about the fact that Republicans and Democrats, for the first time in the House, we're coming together, not just on common ground, Joe, but I say we are on higher ground, because that's what this is all about.
Harold?
Real quick, Elijah, good morning. Harold
Good morning.
Ford, good to see you.
Good seeing you.
I love the idea, but tell us how this impacts urban areas. You and I are from urban areas, Baltimore and Memphis, respectively. What impact will this have? Mayor Bloomberg here is working, as you know, aggressively to try to limit the number of handguns on streets. This has an impact, I think, in urban areas, which you all are trying to do here, and I hope it passes, as much as anywhere else. Am I reading that right to believe that?
You're reading it right. It's going to have a tremendous impact. And, you know, there's a Georgia case that shows that a fella down in Georgia who's a convicted felon gets a neighbor, a girlfriend, to buy a lot of guns, 64 guns in 2.5 months. He couldn't buy them, and so he gets her to buy them. And what does he do? He sends her, Harold, he sends all of those guns to Oakland, which has a much stricter gun regulations. And the next thing you know, we find those guns, police found those guns at various crime scenes. So in other words, basically what this law will do is say, look, anybody who's thinking about buying a gun for someone who is prohibited from having a gun, that is criminals, then they're going to be possibly subjected to a 20-year penalty. And so those are the kinds of things that, again, we keep hearing folks say everybody agrees that criminals should not have guns. Well, this is a way to make sure that does not happen.
Gentlemen, wondering what the vote count looks like to you all at this point. I know it's early, but what do you consider, where are you starting on a bill like this? What, to stay within the metaphor, how many ducks are there that you have to hunt for in terms of either Democrats or defecting Republicans?
Well, I think that to the extent that our colleagues really understand what this bill does, that we'll have enough support to get it through the House and get it over to the Senate. I really think what we need to do is change the culture in America. We did this about 30-plus years ago with drunk driving. You know, we got tired of all the deaths, and though we haven't solved the problem completely, we did, in my adult lifetime, change the culture of America that says it's not okay to drive drunk. And what we're doing with this bill is we're saying it is not okay to buy a gun for somebody else. About 40% of all straw purchasers don't serve any jail time at all. And again, I'm a lifetime NRA member. I was well before I ever decided to run for office, a strong defender of the Second Amendment. But this does not infringe upon the rights of lawful gun owners in any way. So I think there's common ground here. It certainly is common sense.
Congressman Rigell, you're one of the few Republicans in the House to speak out publicly in favor of any measures at the federal level to deal with gun control. As you talk to other Republican members of the House, do you hear people say privately, I'd like to talk out more, but I feel pressure from the NRA, from my more vocal constituents not to?
Well, this is going to be co-sponsored right from the get-go by Congressman Pat Meehan, a good friend out of Pennsylvania, and he's a Republican. And I'm confident that we'll have other Republicans join us. The key, really, as Elijah and I were talking about before we came on air here, is that folks need to really understand what the bill does and what it does not do. If we're going to move to some type of universal registration and connecting gun owners with the guns themselves and the database and all that, I'm going to have some problems with that. But we'll address that another day. For now, we've got some common ground. We need to move it forward.
What about universal background checks, something that, as you know, Wayne LaPierre supported in 1999, but now he's against it. Do you have any problems with universal background checks, Scott?
Well, I think the key is you know, what we're focusing on today is something we really can move forward.
Right.
I do have a problem with the ability of the federal government to tie in a gun owner with a weapon. I think that's a real problem with me personally. That's a more difficult issue, Joe, to be very candid with you here, and we'll get to that and work through it. But this is common ground. We're excited about it. It's got bipartisan support. I think we'll have bicameral support, and I hope we can get it through.
Joe, let me say this. One of the things that I'm concerned about, a lot of times when we have disagreements, we concentrate on the disagreement, but we don't concentrate on the agreement.
Right.
And then we end up doing nothing, absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
We cannot stay. I mean, when you look at what happened at Sandy Hook, we simply, I mean, it was a wake-up call to this country. Now, we hopefully we'll get this through, and then we'll look at perhaps other things, but right now we're concentrating on this because we know, and we believe very strongly we can get it done.
And I understand that, Elijah, and listen, I am so thankful for Scott, that Scott is stepping out. I know it's not an easy thing to do, even though he's a pro-gun guy. To do something that's common sense like this. In Virginia right now, I think the Q poll shows 92% of Virginians support universal background checks, but there are concerns, as Scott said, about it's one thing to have the universal background check, but then does that follow the gun owner and the gun wherever they go? Most Virginians do not support a registration system that would, again, trace gun owners to guns. So we'll just leave it there, and thank you, Scott, for what you're doing here. I think it's very important for all Americans. Thank you, and Elijah, good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you.
And Joe, thank you for speaking out on this issue. I've been listening.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks. By the way, Elijah talked about, you know, coming together, rising above. That's what Elijah and I did when we worked together. Didn't we, Elijah?
We certainly did, and passed some significant legislation.
Long-term health care, man.
That's right.
Long-term health care for federal employees.
All right, coming up, we're going to look at the complex political relationship